Hey guys, welcome back to the Real Rebuild Project. This is my family's personal home, and we are at a critical phase in construction that I wanted to walk you through some really important steps. Now, my HVAC contractor has just started installing my ductwork, my heating and cooling system. The plumber and the electrician are about to start, but you'll notice what's not done on the outside. On the outside of my house, I have no siding. This is just my zip system sheathing, and then in front of that, I have some insulation, some exterior insulation. But it's really important not to install your siding or whatever you're using on the outside of your house before those trades make it through your house. And in today's video, we're gonna address that critical juncture where those things penetrate the house, whether it's hose bibs, electrical outlets, or maybe ducts for bath fans or for kitchen exhaust. We need to make sure where those penetrate the building, where those go through, in my case, the zip system sheathing, that we're both watertight and airtight there. But I'm also going to talk about a critical detail today about how to prepare for your siding. I've got some brick on the front of my house, and I've got a James Hardie exterior on just about everything else. So I want to prepare now when my trades are through, so that when my siding crew comes in about a month or two, that I'm all set for that. So today's video is all about preparing for siding. Let's get going. All right, guys, so this is the end goal right here. It's that vent that's totally done and ready to go. So the siding guy, when he comes, all he has to do is butt that siding right up to that mounting block. There's a lot to talk about today, but let's first talk about what the finished siding is gonna be, because this is gonna dictate how you're gonna make your mounting blocks. In my case, I'm using James Hardie siding on my whole house. I'm also doing this for soffit and trim. And I'm doing their Color Plus system, which means it's pre-painted, which also means when I think about my mounting blocks, I'm gonna wanna think about how am I gonna paint those or take care of those. I might go ahead and order those actually in the pre-painted Hardie material, but in this case, I just ordered that Hardie material package, so I went and got the primed material to make these mounting blocks. Now, eventually, this is gonna be pretty similar to what my final siding is gonna be. I'm using their smooth siding. This is pre-painted. This is gonna be 6 1/4 with a 5-inch reveal when I'm all done. And what I chose to do is all of my mounting blocks out of 5/4 material, except for one, and I'm gonna get to that in a minute. And depending on which zone you are in the US, they actually have 2 different zones in North America for Hardie's fiber cement. I'm in the southern zone, so this is their HLD trim. This is a 5/4, which means it's a true 1-inch thick. And they're gonna make this in basically all the sizes, the usual 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Most of the time your mounting blocks are gonna be wider though. So in this case, let's talk about this specific vent right here and use this as a case study. This is an 8-inch kitchen exhaust. I've got a motor right behind that that's gonna blow the kitchen exhaust out. And here's what we need to do. Because I've installed exterior insulation, and I like having that insulation on first, what I wanna do is walk the house with my trades. That's my HVAC guy, my plumber, and my electrician, and talk about where they've got a termination on the outside of the wall. So in this case, Jeff, who's my HVAC installer, said, all right, Matt, we've got a couple of things we need here. I've got 2 for my fresh air system, the Zender, that's on these 2 gables on the outside. I've got 1 here for my kitchen exhaust that's an 8-inch. And then on the other side of the house, I've got an 8-inch makeup air. So when this goes on, a makeup air is also gonna go on to push air in. And what we did was we located those. And once I verified where he was gonna put those locations, we just drilled a small hole, like a 1/2-inch hole. And we took a big zip tie and poked it through that hole so we could locate it. Then I had my guy come and cut out that big square. Andrew on my team basically took that location where that bigger hole was gonna be and took a nice big chunk of foam out in a square pattern so that I could have full access to the zip system and I wouldn't destroy that foam as we cut it out. Once I've got that square showing and I've got plenty of room, you wanna leave at least, you know, something like 4, 5, 6 inches on all sides of whatever penetration that is, so you can get good flashing on there. Once you've got that foam out, then you can go ahead and have your trades drill that hole. Now here's a tip for you there. If you're building a very airtight house like I am, I'm going for passive house standards, I only want to put 1 thing in 1 hole, which means that when I drill for my AC line sets on the other side of the house, most of the time you see a giant hole for AC line sets, and there's 2 pieces of copper that are insulated, and there's usually 1 control wire coming through that big hole. and it's really hard to air seal that. We didn't do that. We drilled 2 small holes for each one of those line sets, and we kept them fairly close. And then we drilled 1 hole for the control wire. That way on the outside, I can do a really good job of water and air sealing. Back to that, that's what we did for this one as well. Now I did use some spray foam first as a backer, and there's 2 different methods you could use. You could either use Huber's stretch tape, and they make this in lots of different sizes and flavors. This happens to be 10-inch that we cut down to a smaller size, but you can also get this, I believe, in some 4 and maybe even 6-inch rolls for these types of penetrations, for pipes, for hose bibs, for that sort of thing. So you could either stretch tape it around, and that would work real well, or I think even easier is a fluid applied flashing. Now there's a couple flavors of that are options for you as well. Huber makes one that's designed for the zip system sheathing, and this comes in a regular old tube that you'd be used to doing with a quart gun, like this. Or you can get sausage guns, and this is one of my favorite materials for any joints that I've got in the building, anything that needs to span a gap. This is Prosego's joint and seam filler. It's got some fiberglass bits in there, which help it span some bigger gaps, and that's what we did on this one in the end. Was we put that joint and seam on there so that the pipe had at least 1 inch or 2, the wall had 1 inch or 2, and now I know that that joint in between the pipe and the zip system is thoroughly air sealed and thoroughly waterproof. Next up, we're gonna put the foam back. Now we cut this into 4 pieces just to make it a little easier. And then once we did that, we noticed we've got a little bit of gappage, so we just used some spray foam around there just to make that insulation continuous as much as possible on the outside. Then we used some foil tape just to stay the radiant barrier effect, which is on the front of this Atlas polyiso. And next up, you're gonna notice we've got some 1x4 battens on the wall. Now those are my rain screen battens. If you haven't watched my previous videos about why use a rain screen, you should definitely watch those, but here's the quick reason. Generally speaking, we really want to have an air gap behind our siding. If you're in a climate zone that gets more than 20 inches of rain a year, it's absolutely best practice. And in some parts of the US and Canada, it's actually code and it's required to have that air gap behind there. Where I'm in Texas, it's not required, but I get 30 some inches of rain. So best practice is to have an air gap behind there. Not necessarily a code requirement, but it's the best way to do it. Now, when I put my James Hardie siding on top of that batten, I've got that 3/4 inch air gap, which means that if any water gets past my James Hardie, it's gonna fall harmlessly down that air gap and it's gonna be able to drain and dry out. I'm gonna have at the bottom of my wall a bug screen with a place to let air in. And at the top of my wall, I'm also gonna have an air gap with a bug screen so air can flow right behind that James Hardie siding. I kind of think of that James Hardie siding as the umbrella for my house, right? It's gonna shed most of the water, 99.9% of the water, just like when it's raining, you have an umbrella up. But if it's raining and you're gonna be outside in the rain for a long time, you might have a raincoat and an umbrella. The raincoat on this house is my zip system sheathing. That's my last line of defense. That's what really needs to be waterproof, and that's also my critical air barrier on the house. The James Hardie is just shedding the bulk of the water. If anything gets past there, and some will over time, my caulking may crack, some may blow in around hose bibs or other penetrations. We wanna make sure that that air gap leaves it to fall harmlessly to the ground, and that air after the rain comes will be able to dry everything up there. Okay, so what you can see now is on this penetration here, my 1x4s are basically centered on that mounting block we made, and then the mounting block goes on top of that. Now remember, we said we made that mounting block out of this HLD. It's pretty straightforward. You want to measure whatever you're going to be going on for the mounting block. So in this case, it was an 8-inch vent, and I've got my final vent termination, which in this case is a Seho vent. And what I wanted to see was about a 1/2 inch to 1 inch beyond that Seho vent on all sides, so it was nice and even. We drew a circle in the mounting block. We're also using Hardie specific blades, by the way. A big fan of the Diablo blades. Those work great. They're a little more expensive, but they last a long, long time. And then we used a Hardie specific blade on our jigsaw to actually, after we drill the hole, cut that circle out. And now I've got this mounting block that's a 5/4 mounting block, meaning it's 1 inch thick. It's got the hole in the center just like I want. I can pre-drill some holes in it and countersink, so that now in this case I've got some face screws, so if I ever wanted to remove that, it'd be really easy for me to remove that in the future. You don't have to do that. You could also nail those mounting blocks up. That'd be perfectly acceptable. But I like to think about the future remodeler or future maintenance needs of my houses, even 20, 30 years in the future. That's why I decided to have some face stainless steel screws showing on this mounting block. But we pre-painted those as well, knowing that my exterior hardy plank is all going to come from the factory with their Keller Plus paint. I'm going to go ahead and pre-paint those, and if I need to touch up, I'll have a touch-up kit later, but at least they're going to be very close to the final color that they need to be. Now let's think about some other things. This is basically how all my vents are going to look around the house. They're pretty much all 8-inch vents, and remember, I only need a couple of them. I really only need 4 vents in my house. That's pretty nice, but I've got lots of hose bibs and electrical outlets, so let's talk about what those look like. There's a bunch of different options for hose bibs and outlets out there. This is one of my favorites. I really like these. This is the Arlington inbox. If you haven't seen these, let me take all the stuff out of the box here. This is a box that's a recessed mount box, so that when you're done, this is going to be recessed into your house. Now you need to think critically about this though, because anything that's going to be recessed into my sheathing, I really want to make sure that that's both airtight and watertight. And in this case, we decided to make a mounting block out of a different hardy plank product. This is their artisan trim, and this comes in basically like a fiber cement 2x4. This is 1.5 inches thick, and this is 4 inches wide. Now we went ahead and cut it on a 22.5 degree angle, so that when these two pieces come together, you see I've got a nice weather angle on there. If water were to get in there, it's going to naturally want to fall out. We could also use a bead of caulk in there. But what I'm trying to do is make a mounting block that is just right for this particular electrical outlet. So I was looking for around 1/2 to 3/4 inch showing all the way around once this was on. Now this will install basically the same way as the other vent that I just showed you in a minute. What we're gonna do in my case though is I was figuring out the dimensions of my total wall assembly. Remember, I've got zip system sheathing, then I've got 2 inches of insulation, then I've got 3/4 inch on my furring strips that I'm using for my rain screen. So I've got 2 3/4. And then if I use the 1-inch mounting block, that's 3 3/4. But with these Arlington inboxes, that was just not quite enough thickness so that I wouldn't have to penetrate my zip system sheathing. What I wanted to do was just have the wire poking through my zip system, so that I could liquid flash that, make that nice and water and airtight, and then that wire will run right in the back of my box here. I'll have a little bit less exterior insulation in this spot, but I'm gonna do that in the middle of a stud bay where I've got a nice rock wool bat back there to make sure I've got good insulation in that spot. And now I've got the benefit of not having to penetrate into my house. Now, if you don't have thick exterior insulation, there are some other methods. Quick Flash, these guys are great. They make all kinds of different flashing products. This one is actually made for this Arlington inbox. It physically says it right on there. This is the E-AIB. And let me show you how this works. This is really cool. It's actually physically produced for this specific box. And you can see now it's just like a roof jack. It's got a neoprene gasket on there. And once now we screw this to the wall, tape it on all sides, or liquid flash it, that's gonna be nice and water and airtight, even if that was poking into my house. However, if this was into the house, you're gonna notice this has some knock boxes on here, or some knockouts for the electrician to run their wires. We'd wanna tape over those. You'd wanna use a piece of Sega tape or maybe a piece of zip tape. In the past on some videos, I've shown some closed cell foam and making a big kind of cow patty of closed cell foam. That could work as well, but I actually think I would prefer the tape method these days. I think that would really air seal this really well. And now this would actually come into the cavity of your house. I don't like that quite as much. I think there's more potential for issues or problems, but I've done it many, many times before. So it is a detail that works. You just have to be a little more cautious. I do like my detail though in this house, where this is gonna be right here on my zip system sheathing, and my wire is gonna poke right into the back of the box. Okay, next let's talk hose bibs. We've talked electrical, we've talked HVAC. Hose bibs is the next one. Now, a traditional hose bib where you just have a 3/4, let's say, copper line stubbing out, you could use a mounting block like this. These are made by Sturdy Vent, I believe. We actually picked these up at my local lumber yard. I think this came from BMC locally. And Sturdy Vent makes some of these for both standard looking electrical boxes, or this would be kind of a standard hose bib. This looks like a Versatech type material, a PVC, and then it's got a plastic flashing that comes included with that you can actually mount as your mounting block. Although I don't love the plastic flashing. I've used some versions of this before. I just don't think it looks quite as good. I'd rather have the metal flashing. And that's what you can see we've done here. We actually bent a piece of stainless flashing on top of that vent. And all that's doing is really just kicking any water out that's coming down the hardy, kicking it out to the face of the mounting block so that we don't have additional water going behind there. But on my house, I've actually chosen to use these. This is an Aqua Harrisburg. I don't know if you've seen these before. I've done a couple videos on these. These are kind of a neat product. They make them in several different flavors and sizes. But basically, this is a water vent, or pardon me, a hose bib, water vents, a hose bib that is pretty sleek looking. And all you're gonna do is pop this on. But on the outside of your house, this is what it's gonna look like. And check out this sweet mounting block that you can actually get straight from Aqua. This is actually a teak mounting block, so a very rot resistant wood. Boats are often made from teak, and shower benches. And look at that, you could stain that teak and leave this black one. In my case though, I know this is a travesty, but I'm gonna paint this teak to match my house color, and then it'll be nice and white. I can mount this mounting block again on the 1x4s, and then I'll mount this Aqua hose bib right here, and they even come water jetted, or however they did this, pre-drilled basically. Super easy to put these Aquas in. Check this out. This is coming soon from Aqua, and I think I'm gonna put this in one spot of my house. This is a stainless steel mounting vent, or mounting block rather. Oops, I don't need to cut it. It's already opened. And look how sleek this would look. I think I might use this in my garage. Okay, so this part already is stainless, and now they've got a stainless cover. And this has actually been on the market for a while, so when it's closed, that's what it's gonna look like. But here is a brand new mounting block that they're just about to come out with. I got kind of the prototype. Look how slick that looks. Okay, now the holes are lined up. So this could be your mounting block to mount your hardy right to that. If you had a real contemporary look, you're looking for that. This looks like it's maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches, something like that. That's really slick looking. And what's cool about these is you can get them in a bunch of different sizes. This happens to be the 4-inch. So this actually shuts off 4 inches back into the wall. That's plenty for me in the south. If you're in the north, you may want to shut off 6 or 8 or even 12 inches back into the wall so you wouldn't have water close to the outside. In my case, 4 inches is going to work just fine for me, especially because I have outside insulation. That's going to look pretty slick. I need to figure out where I'm going to use this particular one. But most of mine, I think, are going to be this teak mounting block that I'll actually paint white. All right, guys, I think that is it. Did I miss anything? Oh, I missed something. I forgot about my HVAC line sets. One more thing. Sorry, guys, long video, but lots of good nerdy information here. On the side of my house, where I've got my line sets coming through, very, very critical, as I said earlier, to make sure the HVAC guy doesn't group everything into one big hole. We want separate holes for those HVAC line sets coming through. And then I could liquid flash those, but check this out. I found this mounting block. This is the Titan, what's this called? AirX Pro System Kit, Titan outlet, and E-Flex guard. Now, when I bring those line sets through the wall, I can gang them and bring them through here. And this will be, remember my zip system sheathing is 2 3/4 back from the face of where my hardy mounts. So those will have a pretty good gap in there. And then this is ultimately gonna beautify it and make sure that I've got a spot to mount my hardy to. My line sets will come through here, and then they include this PVC cap that basically will wrap around my pipes and make them look really nice. And we'll also keep the UV rays off that insulation. So that black insulation you always see on people's houses out to their line sets that's degraded by the sun, I want to have that issue. It's going to look nice and white. And they make these in a couple colors too. They make this in white and gray. Now my Hardy's coming in white for the siding, and I'm doing asteroid gray. I think it's paper white is my siding color. Asteroid gray is my color for my soffits and some of my trim. Stay tuned for a future video. I'm actually going to be working with those guys on a video about the install and some best practices. And I'm really thankful that I've got Bill Wood, my ace framer, lined up for that James Hardy install. We'll be doing that probably early December, late November, something like that. If you have questions about this or you have some comments, you think there's something I could do better, put a link in the, or put a comment in the description below. I think there's a lot of different ways you can do this, but I wanted to give you the kind of measurements and the diagnostics so that you could figure this out for your specific project. Guys, thanks for watching this video. I know this is a long one, but it was lots of good information. If you're not familiar with my channel, hit that subscribe button below. We've got new content every Tuesday and every Friday. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Otherwise, we'll see you next time on The Build Show.